Okay, great. So I have just one question to start us off. I'd like to know what prompted the university to create the CLC initiative.
Okay, you're talking about the Robinson
Yeah.
Center?
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. Well, I don't know whether if the university came to a realization of the importance of this,
Mm-hmm.
but what prompted it was a woman named Ronalda Robinson.
Mm-hmm.
And Ronalda Robinson is a wonder woman in my life. She's just been a great gift. But she lived next to me when I was living off campus. So we had a relationship earlier. So she and I were good friends, and with some of the neighborhood I knew well. So I think when it looked like the Robinson Center, or that space, would be available, then what prompted it was the fact that there was space available.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the key. You know, we had, as I recall, but my memory isn't the greatest these days, it was when we found out that that building was going to be opened, and then they were figuring out how could it best be utilized, and then of course the person I consulted when they talked to me about it, I said was, well, we've got to talk to Ronalda Robinson. She is the one who knows exactly what's needed in this community and what might be the best thing for it. So that's when Ronalda came into the picture, and she had been working in the neighborhood with her parish and with everything else, and as I said, lived right close to on Corby Boulevard, very close to this place, only 2 blocks away. So it couldn't be a better person to have invited into that discussion. And then we had Jay Caponegro and others at the university who, Jay and some other people who had great experiences with different ethnic groups, of how you collaborate with them, so they're the ones that are calling the shots, and Notre Dame is not imposing on them something that would make Notre Dame look good, but not necessarily meet the neighbor's needs. So I think that was the key catalyst, was to find some person and group of persons, and Ronalda had a whole group, not just her church group, but a whole group of mainly African American friends that immediately thought, oh, this would be great. So we had a meeting in another building, was on Notre Dame Avenue, and then at that meeting people spoke up, and we got a chance to listen to all the good things that they had to say about, gee, if we could do this, or we could do that, or we might do this, and here are some of the needs we feel in the community. And then they came out with their outline of what their goals were and what 3 things they wanted to meet, and we had to present that to the university. And at that time, I think Jay Caponegro was one of the people in the position, but it was amazing how Notre Dame immediately thought, you know, we have Logan Center, and that's doing great, but to have something like this, it's for the broader community, and really including the African American community in a way that's good for our students, good for our faculty, and good for the university. That was wonderful. So that's, Jim knows a
Can I
little
give
more
you a
about
couple
those.
little, a
Sure.
duller perspective, but at the time, and I want to purposely embarrass Father Don, the university had this space, and I think, well, they had some other reasons, and I'll mention that later, but they needed somebody to pull this together who was trusted. And while Father Don mentions Ronalda Robinson and her daughter Marguerite as being key players in the community, the reason the university and Lou Nani in particular approached Father Don, Father Don had lived in the neighborhood, and most importantly, he had the trust of the neighbors. And I think at the time Father Malloy was realizing there was the kind of the campus community, and then there was the South Bend community was a totally separate, and he wanted very much to have the neighborhood around the university be more involved and more connected. And what better way than to find someone trusted in the community, find out what their needs were. On a cynical side, and not necessarily even cynical, I think the university knew they had long-range plans for wanting to develop the Eddy Street Commons area, and they knew that that was going to be an important part of working with the community members and building trust. And again, that goes back to Father Don and making sure they had something that met their needs as this was all going on. And, you mentioned Jay Caponegro. I think he came in a little bit later to the picture, but he was certainly the first director. But Marguerite, people like Luella Webster, who at the time I think had a little edge when it came to thinking about the Notre Dame, and she'll openly say that.
You better believe it.
And that's exactly who Father Don pulled together, the people that had those little edges but had important voices in the community. And we came together in that empty space and put up papers on the wall and said, "What do you want?" You know, it was a fun time to just dream of what could be a good community space. And I think again it comes back to creating that atmosphere with Father Don and his relationship to Marguerite, the daughter of Rayalda Robinson.
So how do you think, starting off with more of a, not the best relationship with the neighborhood, do you think Notre Dame has strengthened it through the Robinson Center?
Really have, not just that, of course, they have the other places now, the Center for the Homeless, and just a variety of initiatives that were taking place all around that same time, like somebody like Lou Nani, who was very much helped in doing that. So I think it was a time in Notre Dame's history where they realized that the community was essential. They knew it couldn't be just for football tickets or for having people come out for other things, but to ways that could interact, and especially, I would say, with the African American community, you know, the Latino community had early initiatives with our Holy Cross people that were quite good and helpful, but they weren't ones that kind of linked directly with the university. But this one was just an incredible opportunity to pull the two things together. And for my purposes, you know, it was obviously a thrill because I had moved over to the halls of the campus at that time, so it gave me more of a chance to go back and forth on my crazy bicycle riding and ways to get back and forth. But it was just, I think it was that Notre Dame had great intentions, and as you mentioned, the people and all the presidents and, you know, whoever it was. And of course, this would be a thing that Father Ted would have loved. It just wasn't at the time, it wasn't when he was available, but I think it was just every one of them, Monk and John Jenkins, and anybody knows that this has now become a place that they feel is not, you know, directed by Notre Dame, but it is totally affirmed. And I went to the anniversary, whatever it was, just a little while ago, where they said that. I mean, John Jenkins mentioned that. So I think for me, it was more, one of the more enjoyable chances to pull these things together.
Great. Another thing I want to ask both of you is, how did you go about identifying the different goals you wanted with the center and then carrying them out?
Well, they got stuck with me, who had gone to Princeton Theological Seminary and other places where I got this training in goal setting and in terms of trying to clear up what your objectives are. And of course, I was here in the program for administrators, a business-related thing when I was an undergrad. So obviously, I had some of those, not so much my skills, but I knew what other people could do better than I could in terms of pulling all these entities together and to make Notre Dame, not in a bravado way, but more in just a relaxed way, say, gee, what a privilege for us to be so close and now connected. And when they walk out of the campus now, they're known. Marguerite Taylor is known by so many people and others. It's just wonderful. So I don't know if I answered exactly the question, but I think Notre Dame was never aloof, and there were always people doing things, and our Holy Cross priests and brothers were always involved in certain ways, and the sisters. But this was, Notre Dame is obviously the more visible, and in that sense, it was for me all the more exciting that we could do it together, and a lot of the St. Mary's students were involved, and it's not like it was just us alone.
Father Don has a real knack of coming up with wonderful ideas, and then he taps other people to carry out those ideas.
Exactly.
And but he has a real gift of always advocating for the end goal. And in this case, he wanted to make sure that the people in the neighborhood had big say in this.
Mhm.
He didn't want it to be a top-down approach. Everything you see down at the Robinson Center, even the color combinations and stuff, we made a point of not making it look Notre Dame-ish. It was, and that was because Father Don had people on these groupings to decide the furniture, the carpet. They got to decide. When we got in the goals, I mean, you asked about the major goals, it was what the people need, what the people want and need and can use. And then we would go to Notre Dame and find out if they could fund it appropriately to meet those needs. And I mentioned putting up the poster paper in the building there, and just coming up with lists of things that people thought. They wanted, oh, we'd love to learn computers. Okay, let's draw in a computer lab, a library for the kids, a place to work out, an exercise room. Sky was the limit. We just put those things down, and then architect students helped draw some of those early drawings. And but people in the community would say, no, we think there should be a door there, and we'd put that in. And, even down to the detail of decorating the place with pictures. We didn't want to just have standard pictures. We found an art professor, Doug Kinsey, who knew Renelda Robinson and drew a beautiful portrait of her, a modern portrait of her that's there. We used Jackie Dickey, who lived in the neighborhood, who was a poet and an artist. She took photographs, and they line the hallway there now, and not of photographs of houses, but of people, so that we could tell the story, tell the history of the postal delivery person, the person on the corner who had lived there for 20, 30, 40 years. All that was part of making sure that the center, the main goal of the Robinson Center was, it was meant to be the true meaning of a community center, a community-owned and operated center. And you mentioned Jay Caponegro. He came out of Chicago with the Southwest Organizing Project, the same place that Barack Obama worked. He had experience in organizing, community organizing. We had people go door to door doing surveys on what people wanted. Our community partnership area at the Center for Social Concerns, we had Annie Cahill Kelly and others and their student assistants working to survey people. And the big joke was, like I said, Father Don likes to come up with these big ideas. Father Don had gathered us all together and said, this should take no more than 4 to 6 hours a week. And that became our mantra, no more than 4 to 6 hours. Well, that was a joke. For a year, it took everybody tons and tons of time. But with the goal in mind, that's what it took to make it a true community center. So.
Yeah. See, it helps when you get dementia at a certain age like mine. I forget some of these things, but that was, I think there was a certain excitement that came from a collaborative type thing. And when I talked to Renalda last evening, Marguerite, I keep thinking of Renalda because that's her mom, that Marguerite talked about it's got to be something that our kids need. It can't be something that anybody else does. So that was one of their huge setting of 3 goals. And then also, there got to be some computer training for adults, because they feel totally inadequate, like I do now with my nieces and nephews. I just feel like a complete outsider. And then finally, it's got to be recreational. So it's got to be where people are having fun and can interact and also do some sports stuff. So it was, they kept those goals, and she brought them up last night. She said, we never got rid of them. That's been for us the kind of thing that needed to be set up. Now, they didn't have a lot of the practice in community organizing and Jay brought in there, or the goal setting and all those things. had people tell them what to do.
Mhm.
But this time, it was always in their hands. We wanted them to come up with it instead of created, as Jim said, an ambiance that they could feel around the table that they were as valuable as any of the people there. And Father Malloy was so good about that. All the presidents were wonderful when they come down.
Can I say one thing about the computers? That was a good
Mhm.
example. People said they wanted computers, they wanted adults to be able to learn computers. And people said, oh, I think we can go out and get donated used computers. And the university had given us a budget, and we tried to work within the budget, and it just didn't work out that we could buy new computers through that budget. But Father Don went out and got a couple of donors, the Rogers family and some others, and we put in, the center put in $100,000
Oh, wow.
initially to buy all new computers, with the idea then that the university agreed that it would be on the computer workstation program. They'd replace them from now on. So rather than starting out with just used or cast off things,
Mhm.
we started out with state of the art, and they decided then to put it in the university network. So, at the time, the internet, big thing. But our best laid plans, we designed courses, they hired a person in computers. The first memory I have of walking into the center and seeing the adults on the computers, they were playing solitaire. But it was so good because that's usually the type of entry for anybody. You
Mhm.
play games first and you learn, and eventually I taught a couple of budgeting on Excel courses for adults. But it was to people who had to learn on solitaire and stuff. But I mean, the center played a big role, and you played a big role in finding some of those donors to make sure that it wasn't just a cast off, a second thought.
Mhm.
It was trying to give good quality things that people could use. And I know the kids in the neighborhood would flock to those, the computer lab. And,
Yeah. Yeah, it's really new and nice. They redid it recently too,
Yeah.
so it's
Or
it's
did they?
great.
I haven't seen it recently, but
that's great.
Yeah, it's a great computer lab. So, did you, when you went about with the Robinson Center, was it more targeted towards the youth, the kids, or the adults, or did you want to make it like an even split between the two?
well, I would say we know there are going to be more kids than there are going to be adults, and just
Mhm.
in terms of them having larger families. But I think it was never an either or.
Mhm.
It was always both and make sure that one didn't dominate. Like you could get some senior citizens say, "We don't want the kids around here." They never were like that. They were
Mhm.
always just thrilled that they could be doing something at the same time. So I don't think that became an issue because everybody knew the ambiance was that
Mhm.
it's for the kids, but it's also for the adults, and they all need what they're learning. And the kids sometimes ended up teaching the grandparents, which was great, and that's exciting. Now I'm feeling like I'm already going to go over to Jim and tell him how to do some of those seats on the computer he's just talking about. But anyway,
Yeah.
those were the kind of feelings that it was just a place that was, you could walk in that door, and whether Renilla is no longer there, but the person is greeting, immediately at the front desk is going to treat people as equals and treat the kids the same as the adults and tell them what's going on, but never to let anybody tamper with making something really sad happening in a place, and that there could be a lot of gang stuff going on. And to my understanding, that's never happened there, that gangs and things have stayed away.
One thing that Jay Caponegro brought with him from Chicago was the Take 10
Mhm.
program, and one of the early things we brought in a person from Chicago and Take 10 to get it started there as a way of making sure that it was a non-violent, safe place. But you mentioned the age thing. Again, this list of what was set up initially, the library. We got involved with the South Bend Library. They agreed to help us get it set up.
Mhm.
We had lots of books for kids, but we had books for adults.
Mhm.
We knew the proximity to Pearly School. We were going to have a lot of after-school kids, which is one of the other things we were excited about.
Mhm.
It was a place for kids to go after school while their parents were working, so they
Mhm,
wouldn't just
definitely.
be around. But that left the whole daytime for